One of the terms that's used to describe humanness, the human being, is a medaber. Medaber comes from the word dibur, which means speech, communicator. We communicate. Now you might say, well, you ever heard the birds tweet? They also communicate. It's true. There's even stories about the righteous and how they understand the communication of birds, and for that matter, other animals. So not that others cannot communicate, but only the human being could take a word and write a book on it. Could give you, take the word love and write libraries about it. Take the word hate and also communicate much about that. Meaning, ad infinitum, we could communicate ideas, not just feelings, which is unique about the human being. Two rabbits are not going to sit with each other and communicate and philosophize on the purpose of life. But human beings can do that. Communication. Where does communication begin? Where does it begin? Does it begin in your thoughts? That's where language begins. Does it begin in your speech? In what you actually verbally communicate to another? Or does it start even before that? I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you for Chabad Zurich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We are concluding today chapter 20. Chapter 20, we want to bring out the idea of levade, the uniqueness of God. The uniqueness. What's the uniqueness of God? What is something so unique only to Him? Well, God communicates, we communicate, right? So that's not unique about God. I mean, obviously His communication is very different and much improved over ours. He doesn't make a mistake in His communication. The difference is that before God created the world, He was one and only. And after He creates the world, He is still one and only. There's only but Him. And we're having a difficulty with that because I woke up this morning feeling that I am. Still feel that way. And yet, there's nothing but Him. How do we understand that? So we need to understand the idea of language and communication. And when God creates, He's communicating. What does that mean exactly? So to understand the unity and the oneness of God, that's our goal over here. Because when we can understand the oneness of God, not that there's just one God, but the oneness of God, then we can live with God and that oneness at all times. Because it doesn't change that oneness. So we began with understanding and appreciating that God, who creates through His Word, Well, a word, by the way, folks, just focus and engage. And if people are writing things that are, nonsense, either it's going to be taken down later. Doesn't matter. Don't give your energy towards it to respond. So God creates with a word. And from the human condition, a word by us compared to our capacity to speak is incomparable. The, or love. Not the impact of the word. Sometimes one word could be very impactful, change a person's life. You're just walking down the street and you say hello with a nice smile to somebody who is just going over to the bridge to jump over, as it's happened before. And because they got one word from somebody, a hello. Famous story of in San Francisco many years ago. Someone wrote the note that was found afterwards. That if one person will just say hello to me, or maybe just smile my way, I won't jump. So sometimes one word can be very impactful and save a life. That's not what we're talking about here. Not the impact of the word, but just the value of a word for itself as a word, right? Not the impact. Well, one word, compare it to the capacity that we have to speak, it's incomparable because we could speak and speak and speak, right? Compare that to thought. Thought is also language. We think in language. We think in language, and with that language we speak. I don't mean English, French, Hebrew, and letters. It can be of all languages. They're all based on letters of a language. We think in language. We speak in language. So compare one word of spoken word to your capacity to think. Well, think you never shut off your brain, so it's always thinking in language. So it's incomparable, one word. Now, where does your thoughts come from? So as we explained, your thoughts come from your feelings. What you feel strong about is what you're going to think about. So, but in your feelings, in your raw emotion, is it in language? No. No language there. Right? You have a strong feeling of love, a raw feeling of love. That could be expressed in thought and speech in many different ways. In the words, I love you, in an action of bringing flowers, writing a card, giving a hug. The feeling is beyond any kind of language or any kind of action. It's more powerful. The source of the language is the feeling. That raw feeling. Now take one word and compare it to that. Totally incomparable. Because there's not even any language anymore. At least one apple versus 100 million apples, well, it's still an apple, right? One word versus 100 million words, as well, it's still one word. But when you come to the source of what our language emerges from is from our emotions and from our intelligence. Our intelligence is not in language, the way we perceive something, right? Thought language. This is where we have to make a distinction, because we think, so we think that's our intelligence. No, our thinking is thinking, right? And our intelligence is intelligence, two separate entities, right? In our intelligence, in our perception of things. So for example, when you walk into a room and you see the ceiling and there's missing a tile there, and the fact that your intelligence, right, perceives the missing tile, it's because that's the way your perception, your awareness is. Or that the cup is half full or half empty. That's a perception. That's not in a form of language. It's beyond language. It will then evolve into a language, or first it'll evolve into a feeling. I perceive it half full, so then my emotion will be, this is good. If I perceive it as half empty, then my emotion will be, this is bad. Not in language, in raw feeling. From that raw feeling, then it'll come to me and say, this is, keep this away from me, I don't want it. Right? This is the order of the human condition. So from our perception, the mind, the intelligence, how we filter things through our intelligence, again, before we even think about it, we already have a perception about it, right? We're not even thinking about it, but we're perceiving it. It's coming through our brain in a certain manner. We're seeing it half full, half empty. We're seeing the missing tile, or we're seeing all the tiles and we don't see the missing tile, right? That's perception. I'm seeing something beautiful, something horrible. Perception. Two different people, two different perceptions, right? No language there. It's not being communicated. It's being perceived merely. That's what the brain does. That feeds or then illuminates the heart to give it a raw emotion. A raw emotion that is not expressed in a language yet, right? It's not being revealed, right? How often, you have an emotion about something, and you didn't even know you had an emotion about it until that thing came before you, You didn't even know. You weren't aware that you had this kind of feeling towards this thing. Why weren't you aware? It's because it never came up in a language in thought. Never talked about it. From there, never thought about it, never talked about it. But yet, you have an emotional disposition about it. Why? Because you will have a perception about it from your mind. So again, let us take this metaphor, which we conclude now, chapter 20, and we don't conclude the concept that we want to bring across. But what we conclude over here is one word that we communicate, not the impact of the word, because sometimes you just say hello to somebody and that could save a life, right? Shall tell a story maybe a few moments about that. But we're not talking about the impact. We're talking about the word itself. When you compare it to the capacity of your speech, it's incomparable. Compared to thought, it's even more as nothing, one word. Like it says nothing. Now, the source of our thoughts is the emotions, the raw emotions, and our intelligence. There is no language. It's beyond language. It's the source of language, but it's not language itself. The one word compared to the source of, the 10 powers of the soul, 3 intellectual, 7 emotional, one word is totally nothing. Totally insignificant. Nothing. The point we're using this merely as a metaphor to understand how God, with his word, that he creates me with a word. Before him is nothing. Not that I'm not meaningful and he doesn't care about me. That's not the point. That's not at all the point. That's not the fact of me, though. Not the fact that do I exist? Well, one word compared to the intelligence of the person is as if it doesn't exist, metaphorically. Which means this is a metaphor for us to understand how God creates with a word, and yet, in relative to him, all there is but him. That's where we're going with this. All right? Let's see if we have any questions here. Let me say hi to Erman St. Martin, Christine. Welcome to you. From, not certain, Eloise in Australia, Sydney, Davida and Liba in New York, Vicky's with us in Eureka, California, Clem in Brisbane, Australia, Sol from Bhutan. Welcome, Carmen in Texas, Benjamin in Florida, John is in North Carolina, David in California, Tassin, not certain where. It's evening time, somewhere across the ocean. Fred is in Uganda. Davida, how does this pertain to subconscious thoughts? Same idea. I'm not certain what the question is. The subconscious mind, I don't know what means subconscious thoughts. I don't know, is there such a thing as subconscious thoughts? Or the subconscious mind that's beyond thought? Anyways, Joseph is with us in New Jersey. Benjamin. Chava is asking in Colorado, is perception a learned behavior? We've been influenced by the world around us and our perceptions of reality. Excellent question. So is perception a learned behavior? Well, yes and no. By nature, we have a certain perception that is, given to us. And by nurture, it's either nurtured otherwise. So the real question, I guess, would be then, Chava, is if we have a natural perception to see, let's say, the cup half empty, or we have a natural perception, and we're going off now on, which is fine, we're finished on what we spoke about, because it's in the middle of a thought and it's going to take some time to develop it to get to the full idea of God's unity. But let's go off on this because I think it's an important topic to appreciate and to understand. And so if we have by nature and nurture, let us say, a perspective that is seeing the cup half empty, or to see the missing tile, as we call the missing tile syndrome, right? Imagine 99 tiles that are up on the ceiling and one's missing. Where does your eye go to? What do you perceive? What do you see? What do you experience? What's missing? And from there, what does that bring to your heart? Oh, look at that. I'm missing something in my life. Oh, you got 99%, you're missing 1%, right? So now the question is, great question, how can we deal with that? Is there a way? So the good news is that being that we're not righteous, I'm going to actually then back up a moment. The righteous, their perception is spot on. Their emotions are spot on. They are never having a negative emotion because their perception is always positive. So they have a godly perspective and therefore a holy emotion. And therefore they think, speak, and act only an expression of that. But we are Beinoni in training only. We're not even a Beinoni, but we're a Beinoni in training, which means we're training that in our thought, speech, and action, that even if I have a tendency to have a negative perspective on things and therefore develop an emotional negativity, I don't have to entertain it in my thoughts. My thoughts, that's king. That's where I'm king. I don't have to entertain it. It's going to come to me because I can't control that. I'm not a master of that. The righteous are, but we're not. But I don't have to entertain that negative thought. I can push it away. I could choose to. That is, a side lesson to take out from this, right? So we shouldn't worry that we may be by nature and nurture, we see the cup half empty. How we can actually nurture that differently is by not allowing it to play in language, in our thoughts. We don't give it playtime. That's what we do. Then what we can do, believe it or not, rewire the brain. We can rewire it because we think differently. Because thinking can rewire the plasticity of the brain. Thinking can do it. It's amazing. Powerful. Thank you, Chava. We have Baklav with us from the Czech Republic. Right, so the perception based on fear, Chava, is the emotional that's based on intelligence, how you're looking at it with your brain. That's the first part. And that's a little harder sometimes to know how we're perceiving it with our brain and bringing it to fear in the heart. But yeah. But the key is, what's the story I tell myself in my brain, in my thoughts? What's my storyline? That's where we can rewire our brain. Brett, are there perceptions that don't evoke emotion yet result in a conscious thought? Not possible. Intelligence and emotions are linked, and it has to go there. Now, that doesn't mean it's a strong emotion. No. Some people have a strong emotion to, for lettuce, right? They have to have their lettuce salad every day. They have a strong emotion because they perceive that lettuce is, very healthy. I'm not debating the issue over here. I'm just bringing up an example, right? And they perceive it as, very healthy. So that perception gives them a strong feeling about lettuce. Now, for others, maybe, that perception isn't so strong, that it's so healthy. Or maybe they have a different perception about it, that it's, it's too much fiber. I don't know, whatever. And therefore, they don't have a strong emotion for it. Right? And therefore, they don't think too much about it. And when they do think about it, they don't think much because they don't have a strong emotion. So you have to have some kind of, you will develop some kind of emotion based on perception. It has to develop something, but it could be minimal because your perception of it is a minimal perception, right? It's not significant. The more you see the cup half empty, the more you focus on what you're missing in life, the more you're going to have a very strong emotion about what you're missing in life, right? Which of course then means the more you're going to think about it and have negative thoughts. The less I see the cup half empty, the less I'm going to feel about the things that I don't have in my life. And less I'll feel it, less I'll think about it. So it definitely, it has to go through that stage. Question, it may not be that perceptible. That's why you feel maybe that there is an emotion, it just comes to thought. Everything is going to lead to some kind of disposition towards it, that disposition, emotional disposition, and how we feel about it. Again, many things we say, well, I don't really have feelings about it. True, because you don't have much of a perception on it, right? Absolutely. Livsha, if a word meant so much to the person in San Francisco, why isn't a word as important? Again, Livsha, of course words are important. Absolutely. They're important because they impact us. They make, if I say something positive to another person, I'm impacting them in a positive way that may empower them. If I use a word in a very, cynical, nasty manner, then that will impact that individual, impact me too, in a very negative manner. But that's not the word itself, right? The word itself, to one person, might be nasty and negative impact, and to another person, it might be a pleasant thing. Possible, right? Someone said something to me the other day, giving it to me. I thanked them. Another person would be crumble and like, how could you talk to me that way? What are you doing? What do you think you are? I perceived it differently, right? I perceived it that, even though the person was not coming from a good place, but what was being said was something I needed to hear. So I perceived it that way. And then emotionally, it's okay. And then think about him negatively, even though the person was not coming from the best place. Another person, same thing, would perceive it as, you're stepping all over me. You're abusive. And would feel low and significant as a result of that perception, right? If you're stepping on me, obviously, I'm going to feel low. That's how the feeling will come. And therefore, I'm going to think about you in a negative light. The same word that was said to me, I promise you, to another person, would have perceived it very differently. One of the things like Chabad brought up, I try to rewire my brain so I can perceive things differently. Sometimes I do, sometimes it doesn't always, not always rewired. Sometimes maybe I take it negative, right? I perceive it negatively. The point being that the word is not inherently positive or negative necessarily, right? It's based on your perception. But that's all about impact. And that's not our discussion in Tanya. I'm talking about that now. I'm taking the discussion to a different place. But that's not the discussion of Tanya. The Tanya is speaking about, I say the word the. Now, the word the has no positive or negative impact on you, right? The. That's it. And I didn't say it nicely, or negatively. The. That word, the fact of the word, compared to my capability of speaking ad infinitum, is nothing. Not the impact of the word. The word itself, compared to my thought, even more infinitely incomparable. Where my thoughts come from, my emotions and my intelligence that are beyond language, there is no the in your feelings. There is no the in perception. It's only in language, the word the. How is it then compared to there? Nothing. It's only a metaphor for us to understand the unity and the oneness of God. How God creates with a word, how is it before him? Nothing. All there is but him. Right? That's where we're going with this. I mean, we've got a ways to go, but that's now, and what we've been speaking about now was not about the fact of a word and the capability of speaking and thinking and feeling and perception. We're talking about the impact of a word. It's an impact, okay? Words do impact. Absolutely. They do impact. What's the proof? God spoke and the world came into being. What an impact. All right, folks. Rambam is coming up. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. I made a nice short class into something very long. Thank you all. God bless you all.